10 years of brutal warfare at Troy would be enough to break any army. But for the Greek commander Odysseus, the real nightmare began on the journey home. By the time his fleet spots a seemingly quiet island on the horizon, a series of disasters, including a horrific encounter with a man-eating cyclops, has reduced his once mighty armada to a single surviving ship. This statue represents the immense pressure bearing down on these men. It's Poseidon, the sea god, who has turned the ocean itself against them. Every survivor on that lone ship is running on fumes, completely drained by physical starvation and the psychological terror of being hunted by the divine. So when they pull into a snug little harbor to rest, Odysseus doesn't take any chances. He needs to know what's inland, but a blind march could wipe out the rest of his command. He divides the crew into 2 groups, drawing straws so that if one squad is ambushed, the other can mount a rescue. Odysseus is now a manager of trauma. He must weigh his crew's desperate need for sleep against a world that has proven itself lethal at every turn. The scouting party, led by Lord Eurylochus, pushes into the thick woods. After a few hours, they stumble upon a clearing with a small cottage. But instead of normal livestock, the house is surrounded by apex predators, lions, wolves, and leopards. Bizarrely, the beasts don't attack. They rub against the men, purring like house cats. Any disciplined military unit should have retreated right then. But from the open window drifts a beautiful, mysterious singing voice. Starving and desperate for a moment of peace, the men let their guard down. They step inside, meet a tall, elegant woman named Circe, and eagerly accept her offer of hot soup. They don't realize the broth is laced with a magical potion. With a rap on the table with her wand, Circe commands them to the pigsty. The men look in horror as their skin turns pink and hands forcefully curl into hairy trotters. Circe has neutralized half the Greek command by weaponizing their basic need for comfort. Hunger and exhaustion proved more dangerous than a monster's teeth. When the scouting party fails to return, Odysseus leaves the safety of the ship. He hikes alone toward the smoke rising above the trees, fully expecting to walk into a fatal trap. But before he reaches the clearing, a young man intercepts him. As this marble figure shows, this is Hermes, the messenger of the gods. He hands Odysseus a rare black-stemmed plant with a milk-white flower called molly, instructing him to eat it to protect his mind against the witch's magic. Odysseus walks right into Circe's house, sits at her table, and drinks the poisoned broth. When she raises her wand to curse him, the magic fails. Odysseus draws his sword and lunges forward. Terrified, the witch drops to her knees, begging for mercy, and swiftly applies a magical ointment to turn the pigs back into men. Delegation is a core principle of leadership, but it has its limits. When a situation collapses this completely, true command requires the leader to step into the line of fire and risk themselves to pull their people out of it. The Greeks stay at the cottage for an entire month, eating and recovering their strength. But when it's finally time to leave, Circe breaks some terrible news. She lays out a navigational roadmap to their home in Ithaca that is essentially a death sentence. This map illustrates the trap ahead, a tiny bottleneck flanked by 2 impossible hazards. Steer toward the churning whirlpool Charybdis, and the entire boat is sucked down, drowning everyone. Favor the monster Scylla, and she'll snatch men from the deck, but the ship survives. And if they somehow survive that, Circe gives one final, absolute directive. Do not touch the sacred cattle grazing on the island of the sun. They belong to Apollo, depicted here, and nothing escapes the inescapable sight of the sun god. Odysseus faces a choice with no moral escape. To save the mission, he has to name a price in human lives and decide exactly who is going to pay it. Out on the water, Odysseus makes his terrifying choice. He maps a course hugging Scylla's cliffs. Knowing that his crew would likely drop their oars and freeze in terror if they knew a monster was waiting above, he deliberately keeps the plan a secret. As they enter the strait, the roar of the water is deafening. The men row with everything they have, their eyes glued in absolute horror to the gurgling cauldron of the Charybdis whirlpool on their flank. Because they are looking at the water, they never see what hits them. Scylla strikes from above. Odysseus desperately stabs at her massive arms with his spear, but he can't stop her from snatching up 6 of his screaming men. The crew is forced to row relentlessly forward, listening to the agonizing cries of their friends. They survive the street, but the psychological devastation of that moment permanently shatters whatever trust and morale the men had left. When they finally clear the bottleneck, they spot the island of the sun. Odysseus orders them to sail past it, but the crew has reached their absolute breaking point. Starving, exhausted, and paralyzed by grief over the 6 men they just watched die, Lord Eurylochus leads a mutiny. He refuses to row another inch. They land the ship, wait for Odysseus to fall asleep, and immediately slaughter Apollo's sacred cattle for a roast meat feast. Retribution is swift and absolute. Apollo demands justice from the king of the gods. As soon as the Greeks set sail the next morning, the sky turns black, and Zeus obliterates their boat with a targeted thunderbolt. The entire crew falls into the raging sea and drowns. Odysseus manages to lash together a broken piece of the mast, riding out the storm until he washes up on a foreign shore, completely alone. A brilliant commander can use courage to outmaneuver a witch. He can use cunning to survive impossible, deadly choices. But in the end, even the greatest leader cannot save a deeply traumatized crew from the fatal consequences of their own human exhaustion.